What happens when the ninth house does not burn and does not dry out, but starts to accumulate? Not sharp pain, not restless instability, but heaviness, stiffness, fluid retention, weight in the thighs, a dull ache in the sacral region, a sluggish gait, and a body that feels like it is moving through density instead of flow. This is where Kapha in the ninth house becomes extremely important to understand. Because most people are used to reading the ninth house only in terms of belief, destiny, higher learning, faith, and direction. But in body mapping, the ninth house also governs the hips, thighs, tailbone area, sacral region, sciatic nerves, and pituitary-linked hormonal functions. So when Kapha rises here, the disturbance does not show up first as irritation or instability. It shows up as accumulation, slowing, congestion, moisture, weight, and reduced flexibility in the lower movement corridor. And that is the key distinction. Vata destabilizes, Pitta inflames, Kapha accumulates. Kapha is heavy, slow, moist, cold, and cohesive. So when Kapha gathers in the ninth house field, it tends to create heaviness in the hips, stiffness in the thigh muscles, fluid retention in the lower body, sluggish gait, weight accumulation in the thighs, dull sacral ache, reduced flexibility, excess sleep, mucus-like congestion in the pelvis, and slow recovery from lower body strain. That is not a random list of symptoms. It is one pattern. A pattern in which the body is not moving too fast, not burning too hot, but becoming too dense, too slow, too loaded, and too difficult to mobilize. This is what Kapha does when it rises beyond its healthy role. Because in balance, Kapha gives stability, cohesion, lubrication, steadiness, and endurance. But when it becomes excessive, the same stability turns into stagnation. The same lubrication turns into congestion. The same grounding turns into inertia. And in the ninth house, that matters greatly because this is a house tied not only to the lower body but also to direction. So when Kapha disturbs the ninth house, movement does not usually feel sharp or erratic. It feels burdened. Now let us reason through the planetary symbols shown in this slide. Moon, Jupiter, and Venus. This is a very coherent Kapha combination because all three planets bring some version of moisture, nourishment, accumulation, or buffering. But each one expresses that principle differently. Let us begin with Jupiter. Jupiter is the clearest Kapha planet in this set. Jupiter is linked with fat, fatty tissue, abdominal expansion, sweetness, growth, and congestion patterns involving lymphatic and circulatory heaviness. Jupiter expands whatever it touches, and in the body that expansion can become protective when balanced but excessive when overloaded. So when Jupiter influences the ninth house body zone, I immediately think of heaviness in the hips and thighs, weight accumulation, reduced agility, slower circulation through the lower body, and a pattern where the person feels physically burdened rather than inflamed or unstable. Jupiter makes things bigger. And in excess, bigger is not always better. In a Kapha-heavy ninth house, Jupiter can make the lower body feel as though it is carrying too much density. Movement becomes less light. Recovery becomes slower. Flexibility becomes harder to maintain. Now bring in Moon. Moon governs fluids, emotions, food, comfort, and the body's tendency toward retention, softness, and rhythmic settling. Moon has a Vata Kapha nature, but in this Kapha dominant field, its watery retaining side becomes much more relevant. So Moon here can contribute to fluid retention in the lower body, a sense of fullness or swelling, increased sleepiness, emotional heaviness, and a body that tends to hold rather than release. Moon is especially important because it tells you that this pattern is not just structural, it is also experiential. The person may say, I feel heavy. My lower body feels swollen or loaded. I do not feel flexible. I feel slow, sleepy, dull, or hard to motivate. That is Moon translating bodily Kapha into lived experience. And then comes Venus. Venus brings Kapha Vata themes and rules the pelvis, reproductive tissues, kidneys, bladder, bodily comfort, lubrication, and the principle of organic ease. In a kapha-heavy pattern, Venus can contribute to soft tissue fullness, pelvic congestion, reduced sharpness in circulation, and a tendency for comfort to become overindulgence or immobility. This is why Venus matters here. Because kapha in the ninth house is not only about heavy thighs or a dull sacral ache, it is also about the body becoming too comfortable with stillness. Too much rest, too much sleep, too much inertia, too much buffering, too little stimulation to mobilize the system. That is a very different problem from Vata's exhaustion or Pitta's overdrive. Now step back and see the full pattern. Jupiter expands and accumulates, Moon retains and softens, Venus lubricates and comforts. And in a kapha excess state, those three together can create heaviness in the hips, stiffness in the thighs, fluid retention in the lower body, sluggish movement, reduced flexibility, a dull sacral ache, pelvic congestion, excess sleep, and slow recovery from strain. Now, this is where healers and astrology students need to become precise. Do not just say kapha in the ninth gives heaviness. That is too simple. Ask, where is the accumulation happening? Is it fluid, weight, congestion, or soft tissue density? Is the gait slow because of pain or because of load? Is the person's lower body stiff because it is dry or because it is heavy and undermobilized? Is the sacral discomfort sharp or dull and congested? Is the sleep restorative or excessive and inertia producing? Is recovery slow because of depletion or because circulation and mobilization are too sluggish? That is real interpretation. And there is one more deeper teaching here. The ninth house is a house of future direction, guidance, higher learning, and purposeful movement through life. So when kapha rises here, the problem is not necessarily that the person loses direction or overheats direction. The problem may be that direction becomes slow, sticky, and difficult to initiate. The body mirrors that exactly. The hips feel heavy, the thighs feel stiff, the gait becomes sluggish. Recovery is slow. The lower axis becomes hard to mobilize. And psychologically or spiritually, the same person may struggle with starting, shifting, leaving the familiar, moving forward with lightness. That is why kapha in the ninth house can create not only bodily density but also stagnation around growth. Not because the person lacks potential, but because the field is too weighted to move easily. That is the real signature. The body says, I can hold but I cannot release easily. I can endure but I do not pivot quickly. I can rest but I may rest too much. I can recover but slowly. That is kapha wisdom becoming kapha excess. And once you understand that, your chart reading becomes much sharper. You stop confusing stability with health. You stop confusing rest with restoration. You stop confusing softness with balance. Because sometimes what looks calm is actually stagnant. That is the hidden lesson of this slide. The ninth house is meant to support movement toward higher direction. But when kapha accumulates here, movement becomes loaded, dense, and slow to awaken. That is the real ninth house kapha signature. If this kind of deep Jyotish Ayurveda reasoning helps you see charts more clearly, subscribe and stay with this series because this is exactly the level of analysis healers and astrology students need to cultivate. And if you want a personal reading on your own chart for health patterns, soul path, relationship dynamics, or life direction, you can book a consultation through astrovagmi.com. I will see you in the next one.